Thank you for joining us today. This webinar will provide information to help districts in completing the Section 31A Annual Program and Fiscal Report, or APFR, highlighting the 4 questions related to schools' implementation of a multi-tiered system of supports, or MTSS. We will also introduce the 2 new questions that are included in this year's Fiscal Year 23 APFR. All districts who accept Section 31A funding are required by legislation to implement a multi-tiered system of supports for all grade levels it serves. Our learning objectives include building understanding about Section 31A intent and purpose, the legislative requirements regarding MTSS implementation, and also to bring clarity to what is being asked in the APFR's Section 2 narrative response questions related to MTSS. Compiled results from district responses to the questions regarding MTSS implementation and fidelity in the annual program and fiscal report, as well as feedback from the field, indicates the need for clarity regarding the information being requested in these questions. To give a little background, Section 31A supplemental funding has been a hallmark of student support in Michigan since 1994, and its intent continues to be focused on providing programming and services beyond what schools are able to provide with their foundation allowance in recognition and support of the needs of students who have traditionally been underserved. The funding is designed to help focus school priorities toward early intervention to support successful outcomes for all students. Ongoing research in the field continues to highlight the long-term benefits and advantages for students who are able to develop a solid foundation in reading and math, the importance of regular school attendance, and whole child needs. The legislated focus areas for funding have been honed over the years to reflect this research. Currently, legislation supports the use of funds to provide programs and services for our state's at-risk eligible students to ensure they are proficient in ELA by the end of 3rd grade, that students are proficient in math by the end of 8th grade, and that students are career and college ready by high school graduation. It also promotes regular attendance for all students. With a close focus on and alignment to the most promising research that is leading wholesale school improvement, Michigan legislation first included the requirement for districts receiving this funding to implement a multi-tiered system of supports beginning in the 2015-16 school year. MTSS supports decision-making about meaningful teaching and learning, using data to match the academic and social-emotional needs of each student. Students' needs for enrichment or support are identified, and teaching and learning opportunities can be designed with the right focus and intensity. MTSS helps to leverage resources and supports ongoing progress monitoring to improve effectiveness. Installation of all 5 components of the MTSS framework codifies the work of just right supports for each student and brings cohesion to the best practices that are already happening within a school or district. Beyond being named specifically within Section 31A legislation, MTSS is listed and required in many other sections of the State School Aid Act and also in the Michigan School Code. Through the years, the Michigan Department of Education has worked with educators, leaders, and researchers to provide resources to support the development of expertise in delivering high-quality, multi-tiered instruction and interventions to match students' needs. The Section 31A APFR includes 4 questions specifically related to MTSS. They invite districts to describe their ongoing efforts in designing and implementing improvements to continually increase their efficiencies and fidelity in their use of a tiered system of supports to equitably meet the needs of students. Specifically, the questions related to this on the APFR are: Question 1 is, during the 2022-23 school year, list who provided the LEA with professional learning and/or technical assistance to support pre-K-12 MTSS implementation. The second question asks districts to list the Fidelity tool or tools utilized to measure MTSS implementation, indicating grade levels for each tool. And new this year, districts will be asked to indicate for which of the 5 components of MTSS they would most benefit from receiving further guidance and resources. And districts are encouraged to mark all that apply. And finally, districts will be asked for which levels of the organization, elementary, middle school, or high school, they would most benefit from additional guidance and resources. Each of these questions require a response, and an answer must be provided in the APFR in order to move to the next section. As part of our annual review of data, our team takes a look at the district responses to these questions. We've discovered there's a need across the state for clarity around the meaning of fidelity, what tools are most appropriate to measure fidelity, and where districts can find validated fidelity tools. We will provide information to address each of these today, and we'll look at each question individually. Let's take a closer look at question 1. During the 2022-23 school year, list who provided the LEA with professional learning and/or technical assistance to support pre-K-12 MTSS implementation. For example, the My MTSS TA Center, an ISD, or a vendor. Question 1 is asking for specific information about who provided professional learning in the current school year. The professional learning and technical assistance directly related to designing and delivering tiered support to students. It's asking for a list of who provided learning opportunities for ongoing system improvement. Sources of support may include the ISD or RESA, the My MTSS TA Center, or a specific vendor who's providing professional learning related to implementing a tiered system of supports. There are a variety of resources districts might use for their professional learning and technical support. One comprehensive resource for professional learning is the My MTSS Technical Assistance Center. The center works on behalf of the Michigan Department of Education to provide a variety of MTSS technical assistance. The TA Center works with LEAs to improve outcomes for all learners by assisting teams in developing infrastructures that support high quality and sustained implementation of data-driven practices within their framework. The center receives funding from the MDE and is aligned with the priorities and practices of the department. They are tasked with vetting and promoting best practices related to MTSS. The TA Center staff includes implementation specialists and regional consultants assigned to regions throughout the state. More on the resources provided by the Technical Assistance Center later in the presentation. So in answering question 1, a list of providers is sufficient. We want to highlight that answers such as not applicable are red flags, since the implementation and ongoing refinement of MTSS is required for districts to be eligible for Section 31A funding. Professional learning should be based on schools and districts' current level of understanding and stage of implementation, and designed to support staff in getting to the next level toward full implementation and refinement of their MTSS. Here are examples of what would represent appropriate responses for question 1. The first example shows a list of personnel who provided the professional learning, followed by a list of topics covered. Keep the response simple by providing a list. Similarly, the next example indicates the name of the ISD providing professional learning, the topics covered, align with their needs and stage of implementation. The final example demonstrates how a district may respond to indicate their plan moving forward if professional learning or technical assistance has not been in place. This slide shows non-examples of responses to question 1. Not at this time, or NA, are not acceptable responses. Generic descriptions that do not provide specific information about the source of professional learning and the subject matter aligned to ongoing improvements in implementation of a multi-tiered system of support are also not appropriate. Question 2 asks, during the 2022-23 school year, list the Fidelity tool or tools utilized by the LEA to measure MTSS implementation, indicating grade levels for each tool. The question asks for specific information regarding the Fidelity measures being used within the district to measure the effective implementation of MTSS at the school level. What tool is being used to measure and reflect on the components of MTSS implementation, reviewing the components, dosage, ease of use. Fidelity assessments are used to keep track of which features are in place and to what extent. These may include a tiered fidelity inventory or TFI, a district-generated rubric, a building level strategy implementation guide used as a rubric, or an MTSS self-reflection tool. Implementing with Fidelity means that school staff has put the features of MTSS into place properly. Fidelity assessments are used to keep track of which features are in place and to what extent, and to provide a reliable assessment to assist with implementing and sustaining a tiered system of support. They list the core features for each tier of MTSS. This slide shows an example of MTSS components that an LEA may want to measure as part of their Fidelity inventory to assess their level of implementation of tiered reading support. Fidelity measures serve a variety of purposes, including utilizing data to establish baselines and reassess for progress monitoring, as a checklist for implementation goals and to develop an action plan based on findings, and to provide positive feedback and assure school staff regarding progress. They also provide an opportunity to comprehensively assess current reality. Conducting an annual assessment helps teams examine systems and practices to ensure evidence-based practices are in place. Systems provide a continuum of support to address the variety of student needs, and data collection, evaluation, and use are leading to desired results. Data-based decision-making is a critical feature of MTSS. Proper implementation requires data to be collected and analyzed at the district, school, and student levels. Proper evaluation ensures that MTSS implementation plans are grounded in good decision-making. On this slide is another excerpt from a tiered fidelity inventory for reading. MTSS requires evaluation at every level of implementation on a continual basis, including the areas of installation and capacity building, systems and team activities, school-wide practices and targeted student interventions. Collecting the right data is critical, as is the use of data to guide decision-making and design improvements. Tiered fidelity inventories, TFIs, provide a valid, reliable, efficient, and actionable assessment of schools' core features of interventions and supports. To support an ongoing work in refining tiered delivery systems, the MTSS Technical Assistance Center is in place to provide a continuum of supports focusing on developing evidence-based practices implemented with fidelity and sustained over time. Schools and districts are encouraged to visit the MTSS TA Center website to access a variety of resources, including research documents related to MTSS, a course catalog listing training opportunities, a YouTube channel with on-demand webinars, available training series, and differentiated support provided on a continuum of intensity, access to electronic versions of tiered fidelity assessments, and highlights from work in the field, as well as regional consultants assigned to each area throughout the state. So for question 2, it's important to list a valid fidelity measurement tool. As a reminder, student assessment data does not constitute a valid fidelity measure. However, student outcome data is often used to determine effectiveness of implementation of a school's MTSS. A response of not applicable or not at this time is not an acceptable response. A short list of appropriate fidelity measures or tools is sufficient to answer this question. Let's take a look at examples on the next slide. Here are examples of what would represent appropriate responses for question 2. The first example is a list of the fidelity measures that a school may be using. Please keep the response simple by providing a list of information. The second example demonstrates how a district may respond to indicate their plan moving forward if a fidelity measure has not yet been in place. Here are some non-examples for question 2. As previously mentioned, not at this time is not an acceptable response. Additionally, stating that Section 31A funds are not being used to implement MTSS is also not an appropriate response. Stating a needs assessment and district planning does not provide information about the fidelity measure being used. Student progress monitoring tools, universal screeners, and assessments are not fidelity measures for MTSS and are not an appropriate response to question 2. If you have additional questions or would like information about fidelity tools, please contact your Section 31A single point of contact. As we shared, this year the APFR will contain 2 new questions that the Section 31A team will use to develop resources and to design upcoming professional learning. The first question asks, for which of the 5 MTSS components the district would most benefit from further guidance and resources? Districts will also be asked to indicate for which levels professional learning would be most beneficial, either elementary, middle school, or high school. Again, this information will help our Section 31A team as we work to continually improve our support and resources. Thank you for joining us today. We hope that today's presentation has clarified the purpose and procedure for completing the annual program and fiscal reports MTSS narrative response questions. We look forward to our continued work together in the best interest of all Michigan students. Contact information for our Section 31A team is listed here. We encourage you to reach out to your point of contact for any questions you may have. Thank you again for joining us today.